Hello, I'm the real-life fake wizard. Adaptations are the death of the human spirit. Yes, you remember playing telephone in grade school? Well, regardless, here's the premise. A bunch of kids sit in a circle. One kid whispers a sentence into the next kid's ear, then that kid whispers what he thinks he heard into the next kid's ear, and that continues around the circle of kids, all whispering what they perceive is the same message to the next kid until it gets back to the first kid. Now, there are rules to this game, however. The kid whispering the message can only say it once, so the listener really has to try their best to fill in what the message was if they missed something when they heard it. But it doesn't matter. See, by the time the message has gone around the whole circle, there's a great chance that the message has changed, either because kids along the way didn't quite understand what the previous kid was saying, or perhaps there was a silly goose of a kid in there who thought it would be very funny to change the message completely. When you're 8 years old, this is fun. It's a great distraction from classwork, and for me personally, it's a core memory from the 4th grade. But as an adult, it's not funny anymore. And this game of telephone is being played not by children, but by millionaire and billionaire executives playing not with a silly message, but with stories that define the human experience. You see, all of human history has been perceived and revered through the skills of storytelling. And today, stories that contain the values and morals of what defines good and bad are being thrown around in ways that dramatically alter what the original message of the story was. In 2025, about 73% of the domestic box office came from existing intellectual properties. 8 of the top 10 highest grossing films of the year were sequels, remakes, or franchise installments. Now, whether each of those films was good or bad in isolation is not the point, but more so, as we look at 2025, 2026, 2024, 23, 22, and so on, all the films and shows and properties that generate interest, buzz, discussion, and money are all whispers of whispers of whispers. Every pass and every adaptation loses a little more of the original, and the original is what matters most, because it was the rawest form of the message the original creator intended. Throughout most of human history, adaptations were considered to be ways of translating stories to reach new audiences while honoring the source material, but today, modern adaptation means the death of legacy for the original creator and the source material. Well, with that introduction, let's take a look at some examples, shall we? The Punisher: One Last Kill came out May 12, 2026. It is a continuation of John Barenthal's Netflix Punisher, which ran from 2017 to 2019, which itself spun out of the 2nd season of the Netflix Daredevil show in 2016, which was adapting the Punisher comics. So that's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. 4 copies deep, and we haven't even mentioned the 2 Punisher movies that came before any of that. And it's the same exact thing with Daredevil Born Again. It's the Disney revival of the Netflix Daredevil, which adapted the comic, learning from the 2004 Daredevil with what not to do with the Netflix adaptation. Daredevil is 4 levels deep in adaptations, and by now, no one is watching this show, and it is truly terrible. Star Trek Starfleet Academy isn't a continuation of Star Trek so much as it's an adaptation of the idea of Star Trek. It is the brand in name only, and what is on screen is anything but Star Trek. And then you've got Rings of Power, which is a great example because the people making it told you how they perceive the relationship between themselves and the source material. The showrunner Patrick McKay went to The Hollywood Reporter and said their Sauron is complexly evil, like Tony Soprano or Walter White. He said season 1 is Batman Begins and season 2 is their Dark Knight. His co-showrunner said their arc was inspired by the Satan from Milton's Paradise Lost. Oh, and there's a literal Breaking Bad writer on the staff. So let me add it all up for you. This billion-dollar Tolkien adaptation is Tolkien plus Walter White plus Tony Soprano plus Batman plus Milton. It's an adaptation on top of an adaptation. There are 5 Halloween costumes stacked on top of each other, creating some kind of Lovecraftian horror that is supposed to honor Tolkien's work. None of which does, by the way. And that brings us to James Gunn's Supergirl, releasing on June 26th, 2026, which is adapting a comic that was itself openly built on the movie True Grit, with a little John Wick and a little Logan thrown in. So, True Grit becomes a comic, becomes a movie, all to tell us a story of a belligerently drunk version of Kara Danvers who is going to girl boss her way across the galaxy, baby. And look at the rest of what's on the horizon. Star Wars again, Marvel again, DC again, Toy Story 6, 7, 8, Toy Story till the end of time, Super Mario Brothers again, Hunger Games again, even though that should have ended. Scream, Scary Movie is even back from the dead. Another Minions, another Dune, Jumanji 4, and well, I guess you get the idea. Everything is just a copy of a copy of a copy. Okay, but let's dig a little deeper to that, right? Because if we look to scientific analysis, there have been many people before me who've discussed this idea. Do you know who originally discussed the copy of a copy problem? Plato. Book 10 of the Republic, around 375 BC, he says all art is imitation, and imitation is a copy of a copy, twice removed from the truth. And the danger, he says, is deception. It works when the audience mistakes the imitation for the real thing. Then we find Walter Benjamin, a German philosopher in 1936, writes an essay about what happens to art once you can mechanically reproduce it. He says when you copy something, even the original is depreciated because it is no longer unique. Well, that's it right there. These copies don't just sit next to the original. Every copy is compounded on top of the original, making it worth less and less and less. Then we find Jean Baudrillard, a French sociologist in 1981, described that eventually the copy doesn't just replace the original, people start to prefer the copy because it's cleaner and louder and easier to consume. A whole generation grows up on the copy and never once meets the original thing it was copied from. And that is exactly how I define the relationship that Rings of Power has with Tolkien. The dozens of people who still watch Rings of Power are watching this show thinking that this is what Tolkien had always intended. And if you think I'm wrong about that, you don't have any grasp on how normies willingly and thoughtlessly drift through these adaptations. They really just float through them. Yes, I'm serious. There are people who truly believe that Galadriel and Sauron had a will they, won't they relationship, and worse. At this point, I could hear a few of you in the comments saying, Wizard, people have always retold stories. Myths get reinterpreted. Nobody owns the stories. Yeah, sure. Okay, well, we have Greek mythology, right, on one hand, and then we have God of War on another. And I'm not dismissing that, but hold that thought for a minute here. Actually, hang on, I am pausing in between doing the video here because I just had an epiphany. God of War is a living embodiment of this adaptation death. I can't believe I didn't think of it until right now. Back to the video. In 1932, a Cambridge psychologist named Frederick Bartlett ran an experiment. He took a strange little folktale named The War of the Ghosts, had a person read it, then had them retell it to the next person, who retold it to the next, down a chain, like our game of telephone from before. And he measured exactly what happened to the story. Every single time the story was retold, he found 3 unique things. The first is assimilation. People changed the unfamiliar details to match their own world views. The second example is called leveling. Each storyteller dropped whatever they decided wasn't important. So the story got shorter and dumber with each iteration. And thirdly is sharpening. These storytellers reordered plot points into a tidier sense the original never had. You see, the storyteller changed the details of the story to flatter the present listener or to flatter themselves. They dropped what they had thought was hard to communicate or too challenging for the audience to hear. They smoothed the story into something smaller than it originally was. And now, we're less theoretical on this. This is a lab experiment that we're discussing. A scientist proved in 1932 that a story told and retold gets fainter and dumber and more like the people telling it, and he gave the rot 3 unique names. So let's take a look at some of this War of the Ghosts experiment that is happening today in real time. There is a new Chronicles of Narnia on the way with Greta Gerwig writing and directing. Producer Amy Pascal described it out loud as, quote, all about rock and roll. And the reference point leaking out about this Narnia film is that they are using Pink Floyd and The Doors either in the film or as something to interpret for the music. I don't think that that's at all what author C.S. Lewis had in mind when he wrote this fantasy. But you see, that's the first move. That's assimilation. Gerwig's team is turning a 1940s English fairy tale into a 1960s rock record because that's the music they like. And also, the setting has been moved from the book's Victorian-era London into the 1950s. The world of the story is being adjusted to fit the world of the people retelling it. Then they cast Aslan the Lion. In the book, Aslan is a male lion with a deep voice, the Lion of Judah. C.S. Lewis is living stand-in for Jesus Christ in the Narnia stories. In May 2026, Netflix confirmed that Aslan is being voiced by Meryl Streep. Aslan is a very specific thing. He's in this story for a very specific reason, a king, a son, and a sacrifice. And you do not cast against every one of those by accident. No, you do it to sand the harder Christian edges off the character until he's a warm archetype that won't corner anybody at a dinner party. See, that's the second move. That's leveling. The piece of the story most likely to start an argument is the piece that must go first. And then that brings us to the third moving piece, the sharpening of the story, which is the tidiest new meaning they bolt on to cover up all the holes. A female Aslan is a new thesis to Narnia. In this case, God is a woman. The old story was small. We improved it. We've brought our own modern sensibilities with us too. Except C.S. Lewis didn't write any of that, nor did he ever intend any of that. And if you actually read into Lewis's works, you'd find that most of his philosophical letters and studies were more impactful than the Narnia fantasies. He would despise what is being done to his legacy today. Yeah, not your grandmother's Narnia is the actual phrase the IMAX boss used to sell this to investors in December of 2025. Well, C.S. Lewis already had a name for this kind of attitude. He called it chronological snobbery, a reflex that newer automatically means wiser, and then he spent his life writing against that ideal. And so the canoes have become hunting, or boats, or whatever it was in that study, and the Lion of Judah is now what Hollywood keeps calling a goat. Now, maybe you're not a Narnia fan. That's fine. But regardless of where you are in your life, you've heard this phrase before, haven't you? Turn the other cheek. Yeah, you know this phrase. You think you know what it means, too. Today, it means being a doormat, taking the hit from those who challenge you, and be submissive. Walk it off. Being the bigger man means being submissive to those who would do you wrong. Isn't that what Jesus would want? Isn't that right? He's the one who said to turn the other cheek, didn't he? Well, yes, except that is the opposite of what it meant. And it's not at all what Christ was trying to say. In historical context, being struck in public was a sign of disrespect. To slap someone with a backhand was to insult someone as being beneath you in the eyes of the public. It was an insult, and it could be done legally by a master to someone of lesser class or worse. So when Jesus Christ explained that you should turn the other cheek, he wasn't saying to be submissive to the one striking you. He was saying to turn your head, which forces your oppressor to be forced to either hit you with an open-palmed hand, which signifies that you are equals, or he'll have to stop hitting you altogether. Turning the other cheek is a sign of peaceful defiance, and through time and upholding traditions, the phrase has been weaponized against the very people it was meant to empower. Turn the other cheek. Don't let them get to you. Be submissive. Actually, this is a very serious issue with lots of biblical stories too. With every adaptation of the Nativity, little by little, more is embellished and softened until people can't really tell you what the original was. The Easter story, the parables, all of it, and countless stories, not even just the Jesus Christ story. The impact of why all of the biblical stories mattered is being eroded away. So it is not just Star Wars, it is not just Daredevil, it's everything. Yeah, this has been happening for all of history. It's not just Superman getting the James Gunn treatment. It's everything everywhere all the time. Every copy bends the story a little more toward the people doing the copying and a little further from whatever was true until the meaning is a clear reversal of where it started. And audiences just nod along blindly. They have no idea. And even the adaptations we might classify as good have this problem too. Even the ones that try their best leave out details or change things. In the past, film adaptations made adjustments because the technology of the age wasn't suitable to tell the stories to their fullest extent. But today, adjustments are made for the sake of simplicity in demonstration for casual audiences. Project Hail Mary came out in March of 2026. It is an adaptation of Andy Weir's novel, and to make the movie, they cut out a lot. They dropped most of the hard science the book was built on. They took the character Eva Stratt, who in the book is a borderline sociopath, and they softened her into someone sympathetic who does karaoke, whereas she is vicious in the book. The whole procedure of Ryan Gosling's character losing his memory in the book is intentional as part of his kidnapping and placement on the astronaut crew. In the movie, it's played off as if it's a side effect of the knockout drug they used to put him in a sleep coma. But yes, the film is good, and it's even better if you haven't read the book where you find the full context. So there's an uncomfortable truth here. Sometimes Bartlett's leveling is not the end of the world when the soul of the story is tightly built and the adaptation is crafted by people who are attempting to honor the source material. Peter Jackson's position on the original Lord of the Rings film trilogy fits this ideal perfectly. Those films were made to honor Tolkien's work. However, I can't quite say Jackson or I feel the same way about what he's about to do next. What with the upcoming spin-off films that tie into the Jackson film universe. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. So how are heroes turned into villains? How are parables meant to empower defiance hijacked into phrases of submission? It's the same way that the story changes in a game of telephone with kids. There are sentences kids just don't understand being said, or maybe they misheard. They caught some of it, most of it even, and filled in the gaps the best that they could. But in our creative world, there are more than just people mishearing what is being said, and they are actively changing the substance of the message in the middle of the line of the game and then passing it along, meeting their own values, ideals, and sensibilities. The people running these studios are just playing telephone, but it's at the expense of human expression. See, people today look at Rings of Power and they may think that that's what Tolkien had intended, but there's also a deeper meaning there too. They think they understand Tolkien. The viewers, I mean, both the viewers and the creators. They think that this version of the story is now true, but also that this is what Tolkien had always wanted. They don't feel like they're missing out or are being lied to. And they are being lied to. And the people doing the changing are doing the lying. These people don't mourn for the loss of truth because they have no idea what the truth was, or they don't care. And they won't pick up the books to discover the difference. It's not only the death of human expression that we are witnessing, but also the death of human legacy. Legacy means nothing when the stewards of that legacy are willing to shake hands and deal with devils for a couple of bucks. But this leads me back to you. A lot of messaging I have for this channel is to create, innovate, and inspire others to do so as well, and the reason for that is the stories of the past have been altered, hijacked, perverted, bastardized, most of them to points of no return. But we are still in a position to talk about it. You and I are still in positions that we know the truth. We can discuss the truth. We know what is good and bad and right and wrong, and so the charge kinda lands on you and me and our communities and friends around us to talk about these problems, to call them out, to tell everyone what Hollywood is doing, what is going on at large in our civilization. But also, it is our moral prerogative to create new things, to make the next wave, the next generation of stories, to replace what has been taken and ruined from us. I'm not interested in seeing Narnia adapted again. I'm done with Star Wars. I'm done with Lord of the Rings. I love the originals of all three of those stories and what they represent. What I want next is the new stories, the next compelling thing. And that comes from you. That comes from you putting pen to paper and getting to work. And if you say, Wizard, I just want to watch your videos. I don't really want to do anything. I don't have a story in me to tell. Okay, well, I got a job for you too. Encourage others to try. Encourage the people around you to be creative. The internet is a sick, negative place. If you, yes, you, were to offer encouragement to the people around you, unironically, you would be surprised how much good an encouraging word can do. In fact, you'd probably be shocked. So until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and cancel Disney Plus.